Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. We are going to get started in just a minute as more attendees come into the room. We really appreciate you all being here. We have phenomenal attendance today, looking at likely over 300 people who are going to be listening in to this really critically important topic and joining these awesome experts to talk about wilderness first aid. So I'm glad that this is a topic that has so engaged people and caught your attention. Hope we can bring really useful, fun information to you in the next hour. So I'm Maxie Navis. I'm the director of the Outdoor Recreation Division within the Economic Development Department of the state. And so whether you grew up hiking or hunting, or you're just venturing into the backcountry for the first time, a few basic self-sufficiency skills are really just as important as any piece of gear. Probably, I imagine folks in this call would say they're much more important. So thankfully, New Mexico is really rich in resources to talk about just that, and that's what we've gathered here to discuss today. So this month's Dispatches from New Mexico series is sponsored by the awesome organizations represented here, Base Medical, Western New Mexico University, Cottonwood Gulch Expeditions, and Rocky Mountain Youth Corps. So our goal by the end of this hour is to leave everyone here with a better education about how to mitigate risk when getting outside, and the best resources that are available to you to further your backcountry education. So just at Dispatches from New Mexico, just a quick reminder, it's a new Outdoor Recreation Division series. About monthly is the cadence we're aiming for. And really what it is an opportunity to take pride in and champion the great individuals and communities, organizations, and resources in New Mexico that are here to better enable more people to get outside. So with that, I want to introduce our really great experts. I'm going to do it one at a time, say hi to each of you, and then kick it over to you, Dr. Whiteman, for some to get us started with the presentation itself. So I have the honor of working with Dr. Kathy Whiteman on the Outdoor Recreation Division Advisory Board. She works at Western New Mexico University as their lead on the outdoor program, as well as the Center for a Sustainable Future. So since she started at Western several years ago, I want to say 2012, I believe, she has grown that outdoor recreation program into a powerhouse that really leads the way, both I think in the state, but then I would say in the country as a whole. The program also has an on-campus gear rental shop and a field-certified Mustang search and rescue team. And then it also offers regular wilderness first aid certification classes and that minor in outdoor leadership studies. So really good to have you here, Dr. Whiteman. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Maxie.
Darian Fernandez, so good to see you. Glad you were able to join. Darian was born and raised in Taos. He studied political science and English at the University of Texas Pan Am American and the University of New Mexico. I know he is an avid outdoorsman, hiking, rafting, cycling, climbing. He serves as the Conservation Program Director at Rocky Mountain Youth Corps, and he is also a councilman with the town of Taos. Good to have you here today, Darian. Jordan Stone, thanks for joining us, Jordan. He is the Executive Director of Cottonwood Gulch Expeditions. Jordan has had multiple roles within that organization, and he stepped into the role of ED just last year, 2020. So outside of the Gulch, he's served as the Conservation Program Manager for Rocky Mountain Youth Corps in Albuquerque, worked on an urban organic farm in Wisconsin, and trained in outdoor skills at the National Outdoor Leadership School, NOLS. And then last but certainly not least, Teal Harbin is the CEO and co-founder of Base Medical, whose mission is to create a safer and more informed outdoor community through education and awareness. She is an experienced wilderness paramedic and instructor certified in mountain medicine and rescue. Her background includes ski patrol, mountain rescue, firefighting, pediatric emergency medicine, remote medicine, telemedicine, and international medicine. She is a real pro. And she began her medical career as a ski patroller, firefighter, and technician in a pediatric level 1 trauma center right here in New Mexico. So hopefully you all get a sense that we're joined by people who are the best in the business. They know what they're talking about, and I'm really excited to learn from them today, and I'm sure you all will too. So with that, I am going to kick it over back to Dr. Whiteman. We're going to go around the room for these short presentations, and then we'll leave some time at the end for questions. If you do have questions, please drop them in this little questions field to the right of your screen, and we hope to get to those before 2 o'clock Mountain Time. Dr. Whiteman, the floor is yours.
Wow, thanks, Axie. I appreciate the introduction. You know, for those of you who aren't familiar with Western New Mexico University, we're a small liberal arts university down in the southwest corner of the state. If you've been to the Gila, you know where we are. We're right up against the Gila National Forest. So it's a really great place to have an outdoor program. To offer opportunities for folks to learn about risk management and develop skills as an outdoor leader. So my take on risk management is maybe a little bit different than you'll hear from Darian and Jordan and Teal, only because I'll approach it from the standpoint of developing leadership skills and working with groups in the outdoors rather than these events that we might do with our friends or singular events going outside. So I'm going to take more of a group approach there. And when I think about risk management is really, it's a journey. It's not an end goal. It's a journey because it's an iterative process. Good risk really helps to keep people safe. That's emotionally, socially, culturally, and physically. It also helps to keep the environment safe, and it helps to keep personal equipment safe. So there's just kind of three bigger things. You know, people come to the outdoors with a variety of different lived experiences and expectations, different levels of fitness, different goals, different expectations. And as an educator, I want to help connect people to the outdoors through structured programming. And part of that involves safety management. If I'm putting people in risky situations, things become a misadventure, and that's really not what we want, because folks can have one bad experience in the outdoors and never want to go again. So I want to do my best to keep people safe, and to do that, it's an active process. So managing the safety of what it is that we're doing in the outdoors. A more technical definition of risk management, you know, it refers to all those procedures that are put into effect to reduce the possibilities of accidents that avoid litigation. You know, one of the first steps in managing that is to sort of understanding how accidents happen to begin with, and then how to minimize those. And, you know, a common model looks at leaders and the role that leaders play, the role that the participants play, and the role that the environment plays, and then how those factors sort of interact with each other. And if there's an unsafe condition created, you know, by the environment, you know, you're climbing on a rocky talus slope in the middle of the night, that's probably going to cause a problem. If you have inexperienced folks in the outdoors, or young people whose, you know, decision-making capabilities haven't really developed, that's a riskier situation. And leaders make errors a lot. So you know, we're trying to manage all of those components, and it's active. It's changing all the time. Outdoor activities are inherently risky. That's part of why we're drawn to outdoor activities. You know, even doing trail work can be risky. You know, you're out in the heat and you're working with tools, and you know, there are environmental factors and subjective factors, those human factors. They all come into play. So, you know, there's a real balance between keeping people safe and you know, having fun. And you know, if you're not creating an activity or an event that is you know, has a little bit of perceived risk, people can get bored, and then that can also create problems. But you don't want to make something, like I said, too risky where you're putting people in harm's way. So you know, I think that like I said, I think that risk is it's a journey, and you know, we learn by doing. And I'm sure that, you know, Darian and Jordan and Teal are going to have more to add to that. And I guess I'd like to sort of hand it over and have them talk a little bit. Axie, if you think that's okay, talk a little bit about some risk.
That's perfect. That was very gracefully done, Dr. Whiteman. I am going to steer this ship here, so tell me when you need a new slide. But with that, I am going to kick it over to Darian, Counselor Fernandez, to talk about the Youth Corps and further this conversation about risk in the outdoors.
Yeah, thank you, Axie, and thank you, Kathleen, for kicking us off today. And yeah, I think my approach is going to be very similar to yours in that it's a group-based decision making and risk assessment and risk managing protocol that we have at Rocky Mountain Youth Corps. So a little bit about our program first before we get into the risk, and you'll see, you know, why it is that we do what we do, and we've been able to do it successfully for 25 years. So we are a youth conservation organization under the auspices of a state AmeriCorps program, and we started out in 1995 in Taos, and now we run offices in Taos and Albuquerque. And Axie, you can go ahead and change the slide, please. And I have the pleasure of serving and the honor of serving as the conservation program director under a really awesome executive director, Ben Thomas, whom hopefully some of you know from other areas of like outdoor recreation and trail work across the state. And you know, a lot of people in our program have started off as Corps members and gone on to become staff members. And so we view ourselves as a stepping stone to new opportunities. We inspire young adults to make a positive difference in themselves and their communities. And we do that out of our offices in Taos and Albuquerque through a variety of conservation related projects. And over the course of a normal year, we're serving about 180 youth and young adults, and our programs range from 17 to 25 year olds. And Axie, go ahead and change the slide, please. Okay. So we offer to our members the ability to get outside, to make that difference, to improve some trails, to improve forest health. And we do that with a paid service opportunity. So all of our members receive a living stipend for the duration of their program. They receive professional certifications like chainsaw training, crosscut saw training, first aid CPR, mental health first aid. We also work with them to build out really strong resumes and to navigate the federal job system, since a lot of our members are interested in working with various land management agencies. In addition to that, we have worked with UNM Taos to offer college credit opportunities for certain courses. And our members also receive an AmeriCorps Education Award that can help them further their studies. And along the way, we spend a lot of time developing leadership skills. And we do that in the classroom, in the field, a lot of hands-on training, and a lot of really cool places. And please change the slide again, Axie. Okay. So, we do operate out of Taos and Albuquerque. Those are our offices. Really, our reach is statewide. We send groups of young people up to size of 8 per group into various reaches of the state. Some of we've done a lot of work at Bandelier National Monument, Copaline Volcano, the Valles Caldera. We've done a lot of urban conservation work in Albuquerque, and during the course of a season, we will complete a variety of projects, whether it's a trails project or a forest thinning project to reduce the impact of a possible catastrophic wildfire, or fencing, or catching non-native trout species to rehabilitate a cutthroat habitat. So we do a lot, and there's a lot of risk involved. We're taking 8 young people who, might be new to the outdoors. They might have lots of experience outdoors. They might be new to a chainsaw. They might have grown up using a chainsaw. Like all these different factors, we're throwing a bunch of people together, different backgrounds, different experiences with the outdoors, different experiences with the tools that we use, and they're driving out sometimes 3-4 hours away into some very remote locations, and they've got McLeods and they've got chainsaws with them and they've got vehicles. So, there's a lot of risk involved in all of that. One, slip, one fall, one significant laceration with a chainsaw wound, with a chainsaw might have to result in a multi-agency response to get that individual out of the field if they are 3 hours from the nearest road on a 2-track that's barely passable in good conditions up in the Valles Caldera, right? So our approach is to take it step by step. We fully realize that we have a diverse population that we serve, and that throwing a bunch of people together who might be friends, might not be friends, kind of presents like a real world situation, if you will. And we've been able to maintain a program for 25 years and have a very strong safety rate by taking a lot of time throughout the process and building out systems and practices that make it much that really try to take into account as the risks that are going to be involved and work step by step to address them. So for us, we love systems, we love planning, we love training, and we love reviewing and refining. And it starts in the planning process. When we're sitting down with a project partner, we're looking at a site that we're going to send a crew to, we want to know what the topography is like, what the weather conditions are going to be like, the nearest trauma center, the nearest state police district in the event that we have to launch a search and rescue. We also want to know what type of work is going to be done there. Are we sending them out with McLeods, chainsaws? Is it fire season? We ask a lot of questions of our project partners as we build out specs for a project, because we don't want to have any surprises. Now, also part of planning is checklists. When our crews come into the office to get ready to go out on an 8-day hitch, we've got a checklist for everything. We've got a checklist for the first aid kit, where they go through and they make sure that they have all of the supplies that we feel that they're going to need. They have a checklist for inspecting the vehicle, so we can make sure that the vehicle is going out in a mechanically safe way. We've got checklists for our medical records, and we maintain a copy of each person's confidential medical record, both in the field in a sealed envelope in the event that we have to respond, and also with our on-call system. So we've developed a series of lists over the years that we sign off on just to make sure that we aren't forgetting something or ignoring a significant factor as we send a crew out in the field. So that's the planning part, right? When it comes to training, the time that we take to train our crews before they even get out into the field proves to be invaluable in almost every case. We start our crew leaders a month before crew members come on board, and during that time with the crew leader orientation, we're getting to know them, they're getting to know us and our systems, we're beginning to trust each other and form these relationships that will allow us to perform as a highly effective unit. We're also providing them with skills in conflict resolution and de-escalation, and even like more than just first aid and CPR. We were able to partner with the University of New Mexico this year to provide wilderness first aid training and certification to all of our crew leaders in both of our offices. And we also provide mental health first aid training so that when situations come up, and they will, at the very least, we've got a lot of training involved in that. And some of that training involves working through scenarios. And our training doesn't stop when the season starts. When our crew members come on, our crew members also get Red Cross CPR and first aid. So everyone going out into the field has at least a basic understanding of how to stop a bleed, or how to perform CPR if necessary. And throughout the season, staff will go out and work with the crews, meet with the partners, and continue our field trainings. And of course, as much as we do to plan and train and prepare, things do come up. Every season we get a couple people needing stitches. Someone will hit themselves upside the head with a T-post pounder and get a concussion, and we'll have to meet them at the hospital. So things happen, and how we respond to those things and how we learn and refine the response to those things is also a significant part of risk management. So every time we have an incident in the field, even if it's just a close call, we'll put saws down, we'll put McLeods down, and we'll debrief it, even if it takes an afternoon to really analyze what happened. And there are some things that we take very seriously, like when operating a chainsaw, if someone chaps out, even if it's just a nick on their chainsaw chaps, we take that seriously, we all saws down, and we talk about what happened. And we go through the safety protocols for it. What was the footwear? What was the person doing? What was their mental state? Did they not sleep really well in the tent last night, and they they probably shouldn't have picked up the saw? We go through all of that. And I think earlier Kathleen mentioned that leaders make errors, and that's true in any situation. And anytime we have a critical event, any type of event, there's no perfect response to it, right? Some things are done really well, some things just don't work out, and some of it just happens to be luck. And the more that we can, identify what we can do differently, and refine our processes, refine our systems, our checklists, everything, and how we respond, the better prepared we are to send the crew out into the field next time. So we like to close each and every checkout session and day with work safe, take pride, make a difference. And with that, I want to turn it over to Jordan Stone.
Thanks, Darian. We're getting a bunch of questions for you, including folks who really want to see those checklists. So we might circle back after this, but really appreciate it. We had a ton of questions about Rocky Mountain Youth Corps in general too. So I'm gonna dog ear that and we'll come back to it. But then yes, as you said, gonna key off Jordan first. The floor is yours, Jordan.
Thanks, Axie, and thanks, Darian and Kathy. My name's Jordan Stone, as Axie said. I'm the executive director for Cottonwood Gulch. We have been doing outdoor stuff for a long time. This is our 95th anniversary this year, which is really cool. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Axie. We work with a slightly younger age range than what Darian and Kathy primarily work with. Most of who we work with is in the 10 to 18 age range. It's work with a lot of middle schoolers, a lot of high schoolers, some elementary schools, and we have a big summer program. We work with a lot of schools, especially here in New Mexico. I have about 25, 30 school partners that we work with, and our whole mission is to get kids outside and having fun. And here's a small example of that. You can go to the next slide, Axie. We do this in a number of different ways. We take kids out doing adventure. Here's a rock climbing example out near Gallup. We take kids backpacking. And then we also have more of a learning component, an active learning component. So if you go to the next slide, we have lot of strong relationships with tribal communities across the state. This is one of our board members on the right, Irene Nota, who's teaching about Navajo weaving. And we have these groups that sort of often go in and out of the backcountry. So if we're talking about wilderness first aid, sometimes they're in the backcountry doing a backpack, sometimes they're at somebody's house, in this case, learning how to weave. We do a lot of hands-on science as well. You can go to the next slide. And that creates a really interesting set of risks, because sometimes you're in the backcountry with only a backpack, sometimes you're right next to a hospital. So we have to prepare people for a whole lot of different areas and experiences. As I was listening to Darian and Kathy talk, I was thinking about, okay, what's different about what we do? And there's not much. A lot of it's the same and repetitive. If you go to the next slide, we do a lot of staff training. So we train all of our staff on wilderness first aid. If we're sending a group into the backcountry, we make sure at least one of those staff has a wilderness first responder or higher certification. This is from one of the trainings. These are also open to the public. COVID has obviously made things a little harder, but when we offer these normally, we have wilderness first aid and wilderness first responder courses that we will host, partnering with Knowles on that, that anyone can sign up for. And I can put a link later. That information's on our website. We're trying to schedule stuff for later this year, depending on what we can do and how the pandemic works. So a lot of that's the same. We train staff. And there's, you can't really substitute for that. You need to have some knowledge and ideas of what to do when first aid incidents arise. But that's not all. If you go to the next slide, we really try to incorporate the kids, the participants, the students, the trekkers, as we often call them, into this process. So if you can see this slide, if you look closely, this is a silly kind of stupid picture, but if you look really closely, there's somebody in the back who's looking the other way. Everybody's looking at this one funny thing, whatever it is, and we got the one kid in the back who's like, what's that over there? That kid sometimes, especially in a classroom setting, can be really annoying, and he's the contrarian. He's the one who's like acting out and doing all the crazy weird stuff. In an outdoor setting, and even in a classroom setting too, that kid, that guy back there, I happen to know who that is, his name's Morgan, he's an ally. He is somebody in a first aid situation who I'm like, ooh, he's gonna notice stuff. He's gonna notice stuff that other kids don't, and he's probably gonna have a really strong influence on the group. So what we do is we, as educators, we work with kids and we ask questions like, oh, how can we bring the kids in and make them allies as we're talking about any sort of first aid scenario? So that can mean a lot of different things. One thing it can mean is we actually might train them on some basic stuff. And there's really no too early age to do that. Even with little elementary school students or younger, you can buddy them up and make sure that they're, drinking water and making sure their buddy's drinking water, and talk about what happens if you don't and how that leads to more problems and more risk, as Kathy was talking about. But when you get older, you can dive into deeper stuff. But regardless of that, we tie it all into this larger educational component where we're making kids really curious. If you go to the next slide, this is a girl, Vanessa, looking at a raptor. We do a lot of hands-on science work, and these things are really integrated. Science is a lot of problem solving. Medicine, first aid being some component of medicine, is a lot of problem solving. When something goes wrong, you need to be curious, you need to figure out what might be happening here, how do you work this? So whether we're teaching a kid about a bird or we're teaching a kid about what happens when you have a cut on your leg, there's all these different ways to make the kids allies as we move along through our programs. If you go to the next slide, which is my last one, as Darian talked about, planning, there's really no substitute for that. And what that does and what the training does is sort of one of two key things that we work on. The first is we're giving people tools to respond immediately in the moment. So if you have gone through a first aid training, wilderness first aid or wilderness first responder, you're going to have some tools in the moment, like when you see blood, right? You're going to have that panic. You're going to have, oh, I had this training, I know what to do. I'm going to start with these, you know, A, B, C, D, and go through these specific things. That's going to really calm you, hopefully, and allow you to take some action and give you this empowerment, whether you're a kid or a staff member, and then be able to shift into this curious problem-solving mode. So that in and of itself is not a substitute for a certain amount of knowledge that you can get through taking courses. None of that is a substitute for like a rain jacket, right? If you have all the knowledge in the world and you're a great educator, great parent, you still need a rain jacket if it's going to rain. So you need to prepare, but you also need to figure out how do you prepare mentally to try to work through these things and solve through these problems. And that's another skill that we really try to teach, whether it's first aid or art or science or whatever it is that we're doing to work with the kids. So with that, I'll pause and pass it back to Axie along to Teal.
Thank you, Jordan. Apologies for my too fast trigger finger there really quick, both for you and Darian. Thanks for bearing with me. But that was great. We've had a number of questions come in while you were presenting as well. So we are going to have time for those at the end. But before we turn to that, I do want to pass the mic to Teal to talk about her work with Base Medical.
Hi, everyone. As Axie said, I'm Teal, the CEO and co-founder of Base Medical. One thing Axie did not mention is I am originally from New Mexico, but I've lived in New York the last like 6 years. I just recently moved back, and it is so wonderful to be back here in the land of enchantment. It really is, and so much more sunshine than in Germany. So with that, Base Medical is an outdoor safety education company. And we offer a whole lot, but one of the things we offer is wilderness medical courses, such as wilderness first aid and wilderness first responder. So just as like Jordan mentioned, NOLS, we're like NOLS, where we offer courses and can partner with organizations to do so as well. We also offer, one moment, sorry, actually. We also offer online search and rescue education and other specialized courses, but we are a woman-led organization, and our mission is to empower a safe outdoor community through access to innovative and sustainable education. So go ahead, Axie, next slide. We are leading a new way forward in how wilderness medicine education is accessed and delivered. For example, with us, you can sign up for an in-person wilderness first aid course, or if one is not available in your area or the date doesn't work for you, or maybe the wait list is extremely long, which is typically the case, you can sign up for a remote wilderness first aid course with us, which is conducted live over Zoom with a Base Medical certified instructor. So and if you're already certified in wilderness first aid, which I hope some of you are, fantastic, you can recertify with us entirely online. We also empower, next slide, Axie. We also empower other individuals and organizations to deliver their own wilderness medical training to their members and to the public. And these are just some of the ways that our small startup company is making a big difference within the outdoor community, and how we are trying to, again, be innovative, sustainable, but also keep everyone safe by empowering them through education. So before we move on to the next slide, actually, I just want to kind of summarize some of the things that we've heard today. We heard from Kathy about risk management, and it's a journey. Risk management, you are never done with mitigating risk, right? It is a concept, a mindset that you have to take out into the wilderness with you, whether you're in a group or as an individual. I really like that. Darian really hit on the point that there's a whole lot that can be done to mitigate risk before you even go on your adventure outdoors, right? And then Jordan was talking about, kind of talking about how when something does happen, which Darian said, I totally agree. It's only a matter of time. Something will happen the more you recreate outdoors and the inherent risk of the outdoors, but you have to be self-reliant. So before I jump into bring it all together and to make it a bit more real in a little scenario, I just want to hit on exactly what wilderness first aid is. So wilderness first aid is the basic assessment and treatment of an ill or injured person in an area where help is not easily accessible. And that's typically a wilderness setting. Some people like to apply a time frame to it, like 3 hours away from help. I don't like to do that because you could be in the foothills of Albuquerque, right, of the Sandias, right outside of Albuquerque, and be injured, and you're nowhere near help, even though the hospital technically is closer than 3 hours away, right? So that's why I like to not apply a time frame to it. But what does a wilderness first aid certified actually do? So they identify life threats. So if something is going to potentially kill someone, you are trained to identify that and to stabilize that injury or illness. And then, of course, it's all about getting help and maybe even evacuating that individual out of the wilderness. Why is this? I think we all know why. Because you can save a life. Even with basic first aid skills, you can save a life or you can prevent further harm. And that's powerful, right? Especially if that's your loved one that's injured, or your friend that you've been adventuring with for years, or the kiddo that you're guiding on the trip. And then let's talk about where to get this training. We'll dive into that a little bit more, like base medical. I think Kathy, your outdoor program offers wilderness first aid opportunities, and I think wilderness first responder as well. Jordan, it sounds like yours, you offer it too to the public, which is fantastic. And Darian, I love how you give your staff an opportunity to also be certified at that level. That's incredible. So let's go ahead and get started with our little scenario. Axie, next slide. There we go. Okay, so this is John. John is a local New Mexican. He is excited to hike the La Luz Trail for the first time. Hiking to the crest up to the hiking up to the crest via the La Luz has been a goal of his for a really long time. And on this day that he's hiking, it's a beautiful, warm, sunny day in March. Not as windy as today. And he has a day pack with some food, water, his cell phone, sunglasses, small first aid kit, and that's about it. He's wearing a light jacket, sweatpants, and tennis shoes. And the more elevation he gains, the more snow that he comes across. In the shade, it's much cooler than he anticipated, but he keeps pushing on. Near the top, John feels very exhausted. He slips and he fractures his lower leg. So he can't really get out on him. He can no longer, right? He has no cell service, and he did not tell anyone about his plans or where he was going. And it's 5 p.m. in the evening. So I would like to hear from some of the participants in the chat. Actually, I don't have access to the chat, so you're gonna maybe have to read some out. But what are some of the things that John could have done to mitigate risk before he even set out on his hike today?
This is so great. Thank you, Teal. So I'm just going to prompt folks, please drop your answers in the chat. I'm going to be watching it here. And as those come in, I will read some of those aloud. Oh, here we
Perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and okay. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to read some out, and I apologize for the delay on my side of things, but I'm just going to read them. They're coming fast. Prepared better for variable conditions. He could have given a trip plan to someone, shared his location, checked the weather forecast, maybe at the crest, maybe he had cell service there, checking the weather, tell someone, hike with others who'd done the trail, prepare and give itinerary to friends, go with someone. This is awesome. Thanks, you guys. So many good answers.
Great. Yeah. Those are incredible answers. So yeah, some of the ones I heard, I like be prepared for variable conditions. So yeah, he's wearing tennis shoes, a light jacket. He's not really prepared if the weather were to get cooler. Maybe carrying, jackets are incredibly warm and they compress so well and they're lightweight. So something like that would be great, or a raincoat. No one mentioned it directly, but there's carrying the 10, or as I like to call it, the 11 essentials, right? So that would be a light source. It's 5 p.m. It's going to get dark, right? He has no light source now. A medical kit, he has that. That's great. Hopefully he knows how to actually use it, right? Hydration, he has some water, he has some food, hopefully enough to last him through the night if he had to be out there. Insulation, we talked about that. He doesn't have a whole lot of insulation, not a warm jacket. Navigation, maybe he was relying on his phone for navigation. Maybe he does have a map. And then sun protection, he has some sunglasses, that's great. Another essential is a repair item, fire starting kit, shelter. All of that would have been possibly great in his situation if he stays out overnight. It doesn't have to be extreme. And then finally, the 11th item I like to add is communication. So he does have a cell phone, but he's out of service, right? He has no cell service. So hopefully at least he's carrying maybe a personal locator device. Maybe he has at the very, very least a whistle so that if the search and rescue team is looking for him, he can blow the whistle and let them know where he's at. Someone else mentioned to let someone know where he was going. Yes, that's extremely important. Or to take someone with him, right? Whenever you're adventuring alone, that inherent risk increases that much more when you're adventuring alone. Okay, wonderful. Axie, next slide, please. Okay, so this was, actually we should have gone to this slide a little earlier. All right, so this is John on the trail. And Axie, next slide. Perfect, so now the question is for all of you, is let's say you come across John on the trail. What would you do? Two questions, what are some things you could have done beforehand to prepare for the situation? And what are some things you think you will have to do during this situation? I'll go ahead and wait for everyone to submit some answers.
Starting to see some come in. Assess injury, check for shock and evaluate him, check for responsiveness, calm the subject, see if he's breathing, identify yourself. Good answers, folks.
Yeah, good answers. It sounds like some people have had some sort of training, so that's wonderful, right? But what are some things that could have been done beforehand, right? Before you even came across this individual. So the people have answered with assessing him, making sure he's not in shock. All of that is great, right? You most likely have had some sort of training. And that's the point I'm getting to, right? You can prepare for this situation ahead of time by taking a wilderness first aid course or taking a wilderness first responder course, whatever it is. And I'm emphasizing wilderness because a standard CPR and first aid course is great. That's great for the urban setting. Wilderness, being in the wilderness is entirely different. You have to rely on yourself and the skills that you have right then and there. You can't call 911 and they'll be there within 5 minutes. So this is where taking a course, and then as Darian was saying, train, practice, review, right? So let's go ahead, next slide, Axie. So if you are interested in signing up for a wilderness first aid course, you can go to base-medical.com, where we have lots of options as far as gaining your certification and taking this course, as well as we'll be launching options for you to practice and train. All of our courses are hybrid, meaning you go through an online course at your own pace, and then you participate in some sort of practical training afterwards, whether it's in person or remote. You can also, if you would like, you can go to base-medical.com/teal, which and you can see all of the in-person courses that I have for wilderness first aid in the New Mexico area, as well as all the ones that I'm personally teaching remotely. And if you need anything at all, please contact me with any questions, whether it's as a group or as an individual, and I would be happy to help you get on board with gaining your wilderness first aid certification or helping you mitigate risk in the outdoors.
That was so great. Thank you, Teal. Thank you to everyone else, Darian, Jordan, Kathy. Clearly, we have a lot of really engaged folks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, so hopefully you see the panelists in your main screen now. We did get a ton of questions, so I'll start with one that I prepared just as I pull those up. And it's kind of intended to put a bow on everything you've talked about today and to hear kind of one last lesson from each of you. And it was something, I think, Teal, you kind of wrapped it up well, but just to go back to each of you in turn, this idea of mitigating risk, I think we've maybe learned can be it's a big and sometimes potentially nebulous topic. So, just to really home in on the concrete lessons you all have brought up today, if there was one thing, be it a piece of gear or maybe a lesson or a course, that you could recommend that people leave this room knowing about, what would that be? And I know many of you touched on this in your talks, but if you could just go back and remind people, tell people where to look, what to think about, what's that one thing that they should leave knowing before we wrap in about 15 minutes. And we can just go maybe in the same order. So Kathy to Darian, Jordan, Teal.
Thanks, Axie, and thanks you guys. It was great to listen to you all. Teal, I think you wrapped it all up. We can prepare for some things by having some experience with some training as a wilderness first aid, in wilderness first aid or as a wilderness first responder. And, thinking about what you might be able to do so that you don't need that wilderness medicine. I think Darian hit on this: plan, prepare. It's one of those, leave no trace principles, plan ahead and prepare. So 3 basic things, check out your weather, understand what the weather patterns are, look at historic weather patterns. When we go out with groups, I always I have a website that I'm willing to share any resource, but I have a website that I go to that has historic weather patterns for a time that I'm going to be traveling. And I look at what those are, so I have some idea of what the average temperature is, how likely it might be that it's going to rain. There's always variation, but at least that just sort of helps get an understanding of what the weather might look at. A lot of folks get into, bad situations because they're not paying attention to what the weather is 2 days from now, and they get stuck as something happens. So pay attention to the weather, climate. Another thing is thinking about energy, your energy levels, making sure you have enough food. When people are outdoors, working or just for, recreationally, they get tired quickly. We push ourselves to really go to, get to the top of a peak, get to some end destination. Sometimes people are overdressed or underdressed. They don't bring enough water. You get exhausted. You're tired. So, and anxiety and nervousness can really feed into that. So, figuring out ways to conserve energy, manage your energy reserves. That's an important thing. And finally, time. Understanding the terrain that you're going to be traveling. Manage for how long it takes to climb uphill. How many of us have been sitting inside and not doing a lot of recreation during the pandemic? Maybe lots of folks have been getting outside, but I have a desk job, and I'm really not getting as much exercise as I'd like. So that will affect my performance in the outdoors. Looking at the trail conditions, how long I'm going to be out. Like I said, altitude, and then our age. And the experience, our judgment really affects our time outside. So I guess those are, work on developing skills, judgment. That, having outdoor experiences helps to develop our judgment for managing risk. So I guess that's what I would say. Darian, I guess if we're just going to pass.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Gear only goes so far, and training only goes so far. And in some cases, it can actually end up being more of a hindrance if we're looking at a risky situation in the outdoors, right? You go to REI, you max out your credit card, and you walk out, you're totally decked out. You think you have every fancy piece of equipment and you can handle anything. That sets up a certain bias that can be dangerous in a situation, right? If you've had a lot of first aid training and you think you know the area, you have that's another type of expert bias that can be dangerous because it can affect your judgment, your decision making in a critical situation in the field. As I've done search and rescue in the past and responded to incidents, a lot of it is people who are like, yeah, I've been running this trail for years and I didn't think anything was going to happen, so I only brought a light jacket, I only brought a little bit of water, and then I slipped and fell and rolled my ankle. And 6 hours later, we're still wheeling them down in a wheeled litter from Wheeler Peak, right? So, don't let all of your training and all of your gear get in the way of a situation, and be willing, even with your experience, even with your gear, even with your goal of getting to the top of the loose, be willing to question that goal and change that goal as the situation changes, as the environment changes. Like going back to that lost hiker, he's a native New Mexican. He probably knows the area well. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna go and get to La Luz and head back down and get a chimney or something and relax on the couch tonight and watch MMA or whatever. So I heard a lot of like just a concern there that he might have felt too confident in his own abilities and his own knowledge of the area, and that can be a risk, right? And one thing that I didn't hear come up in the conversation was, when he started encountering that change in weather as the elevation changed and he didn't have the necessary gear with him, he was so focused on his goal that he didn't turn around. And the best way to to respond to a risky situation, the best way to deal with it is to do your best to avoid it in the first place. And if you're in a situation where you want to hike that peak, but now it's getting late or the weather conditions are changing, it's okay to turn back and try it again another day, because you don't want to put yourself at risk, and you don't want to potentially create more patients if there has to be a response to you being injured. So, be willing to change your mindset, be willing to change your goals as the situation changes around you.
That's great. Thank you, Darian. Jordan, Teal, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll be fast. I agree with everything Darian said and everything Kathy said. I am a believer that taking a course goes a long way, because when you I have a vivid memory, like 20 years ago, before I'd taken any of this, of being with someone who broke their arm and watching somebody else who had some of this basic training know what to do. He didn't solve the broken arm, but he was able to handle the situation because he had some of this basic training. And if you do that and keep practicing, it can move you to a level relatively quickly where you can handle those unexpected, really scary situations with a lot more confidence and a lot more aplomb than you might be able to otherwise. So Teal offers great courses. We offer some. I would say that's one thing, and I'd consider looking at that if you can.
Yeah, I'll be also kind of more to the point, but basically, at the end of the day, risk mitigation is about decisions, right? The choices you make can help to mitigate risk or not mitigate risk, right? So set yourself in a way that allows you to make good choices, right? Before you enter, during your adventure, after your adventure, right? So the know before you go, know of what can go wrong out on your adventure, right? Know the gear that you're going to need, know the missions, right? Know what you need to do to prepare in case something goes wrong, like taking a wilderness first aid course or learning basic self-rescue if you're a climber, how to do a basic bike repair if you're mountain biking, whatever. But basically, yes, cultivate a healthy mindset to mitigate risk in the outdoors, right? To set up to make those good decisions.
That's really great. The activity specific guidance really rings true to me. It's so much right as decision making and self-sufficiency. So if you're going mountain biking, better know how to fix that flat, right? That's going to be a potentially an emergency skill that you might need, and it's also a skill you're going to need well beyond emergencies. So that's really great. Yeah, we have just about 5 minutes. I'm going to do a few specific questions for folks. Darian, a bunch of people had questions for you and for Rocky Mountain Youth Corps. So a couple kind of quick ones and then some more big picture ones. But first, are you willing to share your planning and safety checklists? And if so, where can people find those?
Yeah, we are all about sharing at the core. I can put my email address in the chat box, and people who are interested in the documents can just get with me directly, and I'll share whatever we can with them.
That's great, thank you. And then another one for Rocky Mountain Youth Corps, but maybe I think there might be a segue to Cottonwood Gulch as well. But we have a lot of adults asking, how do they get involved with the Youth Corps? Is there an adult division? And barring that, how do adults 25 and older participate? Maybe we start with you, Darian, and then Jordan, if there's anything you want to add about the Gulch.
Yeah. So we don't have an adult core at this time, but we're always looking for additional programming so we can expand our service in New Mexico. So maybe that's something we can look at down the road. But there are ways you can work alongside us. A lot of our national park sites have friends of like volunteer groups who sometimes work with our core members, and that's one way where you can get out, work on a favorite trail, and also get a chance to meet some of our core members and learn a little bit more about what we do.
Yeah, that's great. And I know for both Rocky Mountain Youth Corps and us, if you want to work, we have staff positions and there's no age limit on those. So would love to talk to folks who are interested. And then similarly, if your goal or you have connections to schools and getting schools outside, that's a huge part of what we do. So if you or someone who wants to get students outside, we're all about it and would love to talk.
Yeah, and we're both nonprofit organizations, always looking for generous benefactors.
Well said, yes.
That's great. Yeah, these guys, I hope everyone has seen what great work both Jordan and Darian do. And lots of ways to get involved, no matter what age you are. I'm going to end on this one from Connie, and if we go to Teal and then Kathy, but then Darian, Jordan, if you have anything to add, please jump in there. And again, it's a little bit of a recap from what's been talked about today, but just want to make sure people are really clear on what the answer is to this. So Connie asks, where, when can we access mountain first aid, wilderness, backcountry courses? She says she has been unsuccessful finding one within 300 miles of Santa Fe. Obviously, Teal, you've talked specifically about some of this, so if you want to kind of put a bow on it, and then anyone else, please jump in to just answer that specifically. Where do people go now to find these courses, both online and in person?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. So I know as far as, again, there's different ways you can certify different types of courses that you can take. If you want an in-person course, which is fantastic and incredibly valuable, I know REI does offer some courses through Knowles, as well as like some other programs throughout the state. But unfortunately, I believe it's Connie, right? What's the name? She's right. There are not a lot of courses that are available throughout the state of New Mexico, which is one thing that I am trying to change. So I do courses in Albuquerque coming up in June and July, and we'll be putting more on the books soon, probably Santa Fe, and then we're also looking at Taos. And but for those that are located in the parts of New Mexico where it's harder, like if you don't want to take a weekend, if you don't have a weekend to travel to Albuquerque or to Santa Fe, Taos, or southern New Mexico to take these courses, the other option is the remote wilderness first aid course. And so again, it's self-paced online is the first part of the course. You go through all of the theory and the didactics, and then it's an 8-hour day of live Zoom training, and it is not passive by any means. You will be doing scenarios, you'll be doing skills, you have to have an individual to volunteer their time and spend the day with you to act as your patient, which is a whole lot of fun. And so it's very, very interactive, and you won't be sitting, that's for sure. So it's just as effective as, but that's a very good solution for those that cannot find a course within their area.
Awesome. That's a great, super helpful answer. Kathy, is there anything you want to add from the outdoor recreation capital that is Grant County?
Western New Mexico University currently has a wilderness first aid class being offered in a face-to-face format in May, and we're offering hybrid wilderness first responder training. The part one is being offered online now. This is offered through the Wilderness Medicine Training Center. Another provider, as Teal mentioned, there are lots of different providers, and they're great. So, it's nice that we can share resources and connect people in different places. So anyway, part one is being offered online right now. If you complete part one, then you can register for part two, which is the 5-day face-to-face training, also in May on the Western New Mexico University campus, or the Gila. It's probably going to be actually on the Gila because of COVID restrictions, allowing people to be outside fully in a covered pavilion. So we do have that. Those classes are open to the public. You can go now and register for them. Read about them. You have to complete both parts 1 and 2 to be certified as a wilderness first responder. But they're going now. They're live now. We try to rotate our wilderness first responder and wilderness first aid every other year. The WFR certification lasts a couple of years. So we try to keep that running because we have a lot of folks down in the southwestern corner of the state who are really actively engaged in the outdoors. Lots of folks doing SAR, and we're just so remote. We can fill those classes really quickly. So.
That's great.
Hey,
I think there'll be more as COVID hopefully continues to get better. I think that's been part of the issue. And the lack of courses over the last year. So I'm hoping there will be more. We're going to offer more as well, both in Albuquerque and in Western New Mexico near Gallup. So that'll be happening more as the year goes on, hopefully, and next year.
Well, there's a wealth of
Yeah,
information.
and just as Jordan, I'm sorry, actually, there's a delay. But just as you said, with COVID, there are restrictions, right? And courses are slow to roll out, which is another reason why you may not be seeing a whole lot in your area. But again, for those comfortable taking an in-person course during COVID times, or just can't for health reasons or whatever, or again, there's just nothing available in your area, that remote option is a possibility. But then also, again, as Kathy mentioned, there's different providers of wilderness medicine. I am one of those providers. Base Medical is one of those providers, meaning if you have a group, right, and if you want training for your entire organization, contact me and we can get that set up. And then the other thing about our model that is very unique and different than any others is that we can actually train individuals in your organization to become instructors, and then you can deliver your own wilderness first aid courses to your staff and to the public.
No, I'm really glad that you brought that up, Teal, and I think we'll end there, not because of a lack of question. There's still quite a few more, but just want to be really respectful of everyone's time. So what I can do in this outdoor recreation division chair that I'm honored to sit in is act as something of a convener. So if you're looking for information as a follow-up from this, we can help make sure you're in touch with the right people. Maybe it's one of the 4 experts in this room, maybe it's someone else specific to your part of the state. And then we also have contact info in the chat, and we'll be following up with this recorded link, a link to our website, and ways to get back in touch with us. We might also be able to answer some of these questions offline in that setting. And I might have a request for Darian to share those search and rescue checklist, or the checklist that he goes through, the planning processes, and we might be able to be kind of the hub to share that as well with his permission. So we'll be in touch. So appreciate you joining us this afternoon. And thank you especially to our 4 panelists. It's always a pleasure to see all of you, and I know I sure learned a lot today. So very much appreciate it. Thank you for being here, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thanks, Axie.
Take care.
Axie.
Thank you all.